Oh, I'm obsessed with my eyeshadow today. I did such a good job, even if I do say so myself. Serving tropical sunset realness. Hey, hey, hey. Welcome back to the Pretty Bookish channel, where we talk all things books all the time. My name is Kanya, your resident book nerd and knower of all things book related and lover of all things book related. Welcome if it's your first time here. Welcome back if you're an OG. So if you're an OG, you're probably thinking, what's going on? This is not my typical location. I am actually away for the weekend, but I needed to shoot this video. I really wanted to shoot this video, so I just like hauled all these books with me. We drove out to just outside Bella Bella to like the game farm to kind of just like have a bit of a weekend away, and I thought this is the perfect time because I actually did shoot this video yesterday, by the way. I shot it, but then I watched Lala's video. You guys will see, I'll link it below. Books and Lala did a kind of quarterly which was similar to what I shot, but she added an element that I realized, oh my god, why have I been tracking by stats if I'm not going to include them, so you guys can kind of see a demographic breakdown of kind of what I've been reading. So I decided, let me just reshoot it so that you guys can get that information. So yeah, we're in a really cute like little house or whatever. I'm in my room right now with this little fluffy bed behind me. So yeah, so today I'm going to be running you guys through my quarterly basically review, my top 10 books of 2021 so far, but also giving you guys a bit of my statistical breakdown of like the genres I've been reading, the kind of gender demographics, and also just like roughly some of the stats I've been keeping up with. I think it's just interesting to kind of take a bit of stock because I've been looking at it and there's an element of it that I feel like I need to fix. There's some stuff that you don't really notice how much your reading is leaning in one direction until you actually like calculate, and you're just like, oh, hang on one second, I need to, you know, pivot a little bit and try and include a little bit more books from this genre or from this kind of representative group or whatever. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do today. So first off, I'm gonna start by running you guys through my stats. Some light admin before we start. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram on @prettyxbookish. Like, comment, follow, share, all that fun stuff. You guys know the drill. Tell your mama, tell your granddaddy, everybody to follow me on Instagram and to subscribe to my channel. Okay, so you guys know I have a reading journal. I actually left it at home, so you can't really see it, but my reading journal has been really helping me to kind of keep track of what genres and stuff that I've read. I actually bought a little small notebook. I just wrote some stuff down because I do keep all my information on my notes on my phone. Okay, so let's start with my kind of genre breakdown. So this year so far, I've read 58 books. So this is like towards the end of March, I've read 58 books so far. So of the 58 books that I've read, I'm going to give you guys like a cute little pie chart here. Look at me. Graphics and stuff. So what you guys will see from this chart roughly is that I've read 16 fantasy books. I've read 10 YA, 5 African lit, 9 contemporary or literary fiction, 12 romance books, 3 non-fictions, and 3 short story collections. So when I was looking through this, as you can obviously see, fantasy has the biggest chunk of the pie. I'm not surprised. I have been reading a lot of fantasy in the last kind of 3 months, and I've been the primary reason was because I had a lot of fantasy books on my shelf that I wanted to clear out. And you guys know I've been working through my backlist. So a lot of those books are fantasy books that I already owned, and I was just trying to get some of the book ones out of the way. And just generally, I've just been in the mood for an immersive reading experience, and fantasy has just kind of been providing that for me. So yeah, the thing is, from this graph, the one problem I see is that like my African lit reading is abysmal. Like I read 5 books by African writers this year, and I'm just like, wow, no, that can't be a thing. Like I really need to make more of a concerted effort because I actually do have quite a few books, but I don't know why I'm not pivoting towards them. And also there's a couple of new releases that I've ordered, so I guess in the coming weeks or coming months or whatever, you'll see a lot more. But this is definitely something I want to fix because I want to be able to read as many African writers as I can, and there's a lot of backlist books that I still want to read. So yeah, that's one element that I'm definitely going to pay more attention to. And with the romance, you guys, I did say to you guys that I've been pivoting away from kind of romance, traditional romance. The reason why there's 12 of these is these are all queer. Most of these, if not, no, 10 of the 12 are queer, ebooks that I've read on my Kindle. So that's why, or on my phone rather, because my dad still hasn't bought me a Kindle. By the way, update guys, I still haven't got one. So that's what that is, because I know I did say that I haven't read romance. So you're probably thinking, okay, why are there so many? It's like literally, and there was, especially in March, I was struggling to get really into anything. I wasn't really in the mood for a lot of stuff. So I just found myself like really picking up a lot of queer romance novels, like some Ella Frank. I was reading a bit of Charlie Cochet, some A.E. Via. So those kinds of books, those are my favorite like kind of genres, these like really dark and sexy like queer romance novels. There's a whole world of those books. If you like ebooks, if you want some recs, you can ask me. But like those books are really great to kind of get you moving, right? So that's what that is. Okay, so next, the other stat that I wanted to break down was kind of the demographics of gender. So in the first 3 months of the year, I have read 39 books by women. Of the 58 books, 39 are by women, 8 are by men, and 1 is by trans non-binary writer. And I think for me, that's more or less makes sense. I do tend to gravitate more towards female writers and women writers. That's just generally my thing. And because a lot of my books, I read a lot of queer lit, but obviously queer lit is not a separate kind of gender unless they specify that they're kind of gender fluid or gender non-conforming. You will see that this stat will probably change for Q2, because Pride Month is when you see me really dive deep into queer lit. And this year I'm really, I've started already getting a couple of books, doing a lot of research on books by trans non-binary writers, because I think that's one of my gaps. I read and sapphic romance, by the way. That's another thing that I read very little of. But more or less, broadly speaking, gender, I'm more or less happy with how that looks right now. Obviously, as I said, Q2, we'll see a little bit of a change. A little bit more non-binary stuff will probably creep in. Okay, so the third stat that I kind of collected was the kind of racial demographics, and I didn't want to really go into that, like the intricacies, but more or less BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color writers, they are at 38 and 20 books by white writers. And those 20 books by white writers, again, a big bulk of them are those kind of queer romance novels that I find on my Kindle, and a couple of physical books, but the bulk of the physical books that I own are by people of color, written by people of color. So that I'm more or less happy with. You will also see that when I read a lot more physical books, it kind of, the demographics do skew very heavily in kind of people of color dynamics. Now, if I had to do I can't really remember like the kind of intricate breakdown within the BIPOC broad umbrella, but I did say that a majority of that is Black, and I would like to read a lot more Asian, a lot more Indian, a lot more Middle Eastern, and a lot more Latinx books. But I think Latinx, I actually have quite a few, so that one I'm fine with. But Asian, I'm also trying to move in that direction to get a lot more Asian lit. So yeah, so that's more or less that demographic background. And then the other thing, the last stat, is the new versus old. You guys know that I've been kind of working my way through my backlist. So right now where it stands, as you can see from this really cute graph, I have read, of the 58 books, 46 are books that came out last year or the year before. So before the beginning of 2019, wow girl, what year are you in? Before the beginning of 2021, and only 12 of the ones that I have are new releases. And of those 12 that are new releases, a really big chunk of them are audiobooks that I've been gifted by Libro. I do buy physical books that are new, but a lot of you probably see that change as the year goes. But right now I'm still clearing my backlist. So a lot of the books that I've read are books that didn't come out this year. I personally feel like books don't expire. That's the nice thing about reading. So if a book came out in 2019, whether I read it in 2019 or in 2023, the story is still going to hit. You know what I mean? If the book is good, it's still going to be good. So I'm really not that concerned about that. Really happy with that is. And as I said, from my reading journal, all of those 46 books, those are all books that I already physically own. So I've actually cleared 50% of my backlist, which I'm so happy about because it's only Q1. And my goal was by the end of the year to have done 80%. And I suspect I will have been able to do 100% of my backlist. But I mean, that's not helpful because as a serial book buyer, I'll probably have more backlist by the end of December. So whatever, doesn't matter. So those are more or less my demographic backgrounds as we stand right now. Right, onto the fun part. Although I think the statistics were really fun, I think those analytics are something I implore everybody to really try and figure out your analytics. It's really interesting to go back and look at. But the fun part, my top 10 books of 2021 so far. This is the moment you guys have all been waiting for, although not really, but you should have been waiting for it. I think I'm gonna do a top 10 of every quarter, because again, just like with the anticipated releases, for me, this thing of people doing a top 10 at the end of the year only, I don't know how you assess that if you're not taking periodic breaks. I also think giving you guys a top 10, these are the books that I absolutely love, that I highly recommend. So if you're going to mine, if you're going to think about any books to read, if you're going to mine any of my videos for the must reads, the books that I absolutely recommend, because obviously when I do wrap-ups, I've given quite a few 5 stars, quite a few 4 stars. There's quite a few books that I've absolutely loved this year. Do you know what I mean? So I think this video is really helpful if you're just trying to be like, okay, sis, I get it. You like a lot of books, but which are the ones that like I can click purchase in my cart right now? And these are the ones. So let me run you guys through my top 10 books, and you wouldn't be surprised because I've actually gushed about these all, but yeah, let's get started. So the first book is obviously probably my favorite audiobook of the year. I ordered a physical copy for myself for my birthday. It's going to arrive really soon. And that is Black Buck by Matteo Askirapour. You guys knew it was going to make the top 10 of Q1. It actually probably is going to make the top 10 of the year. I'm really, really convinced it's going to. I absolutely love this book. It was so well written. It's smart, it's sharp, it's witty. There's nothing else I can say about it that I haven't said already. Watch my other videos, watch my January wrap-up because I listened to it in January, and my video on books that are great on audio, because I went into quite a bit of detail about why I like that book. But what's the thing? Black Buck, fantastic, absolutely love it, makes the top 10. The next one is also an audiobook, and it was one of the best audiobook listening experiences because the narrator was fantastic, and it is How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherry Jones. So I've seen a lot of people who read the physical book, who've reviewed this book, who haven't had a great experience, who said, oh, they didn't like it, it was super slow. I listened to it on audio 1.5 speed, and let me tell you, that experience, I was in the story. Like, and a part of the reason is, I said this when I reviewed the book, is that when the narrator is Caribbean from Barbados and the book is a Caribbean writer and the story is set in Barbados, you feel like you're a part of the story. Like, it's rhythmic and it moves a lot more because obviously it's been read by somebody who understands. So that one, definitely. Okay, so the next one is another one that I listened to on audiobook and I loved it so much. I listened to it, I think, I want to say in February. I got an advanced listener's copy. It's actually coming out this month in April, I think the last week of April. So definitely set your calendars. This is a must purchase. And it is Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet by Laekan, Kemp. I've already said this in my wrap-up, but it was just such a fantastic audiobook. The story, it's like this YA novel, and I loved Penelope. It's this YA novel set in a Latinx community, and I just loved Penelope. Ooh, the door is gonna close anyway. I loved the main character, Penelope. I loved her relationship with her parents, and I loved the way that the struggles they were going through as a community, and I love how the book really focused a lot on the kind of community, the Latinx community. And so yeah, I really love that book. Audiobook was fantastic. A lot of food descriptions because Penelope is kind of a baker, so be ready to want to eat everything in sight, but that one fantastic as well. So the next one is one that you guys are not going to be surprised about at all because I rave about this book every opportunity I get. I even did a makeup recreation on Instagram. Love this book so much, and it is Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. Fantastic, one of the best fantasy books I've ever read, one of the best black fantasies. It's rooted, or kind of a reimagining, retelling extension of the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and like I really love, like that's one of my favorite old school myths. One of my favorite myths is King Arthur. Between that and Greek mythology, I'm done. Tracy Deonn, it was so rooted in the original story, but also so fresh, so new, such a great new fresh take, and she brings so much social commentary on it. And the fact that Bria is a black main character, she balances the conversation about race with the conversation about this kind of historical society or whatever, and just fantastic writing. So this is another one that definitely has to make the top 10 because it was absolutely fantastic. The next one is another fantasy that ripped my heart out of my chest and had me like broken on the floor. I actually recently finished, you've probably seen my March wrap up, this sequel, and I would give this series top 10, but we're just going to talk about book 1, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. It is literally phenomenal. Literally, like this is the kind of fantasy that like I think about all the time. It's living rent-free in my head, honestly, the story, because literally you don't expect to read a book where there is such moral complexity and such moral like ambiguity, especially in fantasy books, because a lot of the time you get a clear sense of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. This one, I don't know who was supposed to be supporting, because Rin is like, she doing a lot. At the end of this book, she's doing a lot. In book 2, she's doing a lot. Like, this book hurts, but in the best possible way. And I think this series is phenomenal. It's also roughly based on the history of China and the kind of history of China between the kind of civil unrest and the internal workings and the internal strifes in China, and the kind of also history of colonization in China and that kind of dynamic, especially in the second book with the introduction of the Hesperians. But I absolutely love this book. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great fantasy book. So yeah, this one definitely had to make the list. And then the next one is also a fantasy that I was just like, fam, it's actually a science fiction, and it is Illuminati by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Look, I am not a huge science fiction fan, but this blew me out of the water. I absolutely love this book. It was so good. Part of the reason, I've showed you guys this before, but it's that the format of this book is so smart. It is so incredibly well written. So it's basically a science fiction book that's told in the form of redacted documents, emails, photos, transcriptions of like conversations. So it's not a straight narrative, and that just made it such an interesting read. And then also the story itself was just like, the end, I was just like, oh my goodness. And like, lastly, I just want to say, Aiden for president. Aiden for president, that's what I have to say. If you've read this book, you know what I mean. If you haven't, please read it so that you can also be a part of this like Aiden for president train. Next one is also kind of a fantasy, but it's more of a YA wholesome, makes your heart happy fantasy that was a Bookstagram fave that I finally read. Came out 2020, that I finally read and absolutely loved, and it is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Look, this book is the book equivalent of a hug. Like, people say that and they're right. It's like the most heartwarming stuff. Like, you guys, these kids, like, I just love all these kids. Like, Theodore is probably like not Theodore, Chauncey, actually, because I love Theodore, but Chauncey lives rent-free in my head. Chauncey is my favorite. Like, I would fight battles for Chauncey, and I love everything about this book, these kids, the story. It is really such a great message behind the book, so I highly recommend this one as well. If you're looking for something wholesome, there is romance, but the romance is very light. It's more of a book about accepting yourself, about society expectations of children, and you being yourself, basically. It's like a fantasy book about that kind of thing. So it's really wholesome, and I just think that this is it's a great book if you're looking for something just like a marshmallow, a warm pillow of a book. So this one as well. So then the next one that I highly recommend is one of these books that Bookstagram loved, and I have to co-sign. The writing is superb. It's some of the best writing I've ever read. Parts of it are a little bit overextended, like the writing overextends itself slightly, but there is such beautiful lyricism in the way that Robert Jones Jr. writes. So obviously I had to have The Prophets as one of my top 10 books. It's funny because I actually started The Prophets the last time I was here. So yeah, that's an interesting little link. But The Prophets is basically a queer slave narrative that tells the story of Samuel and Isaiah, these two slave boys who fall in love and who are kind of soulmates, and how they navigate the kind of space of having your body not belong to yourself and being a slave and trying to keep this piece of themselves and this love that they have sacred. And it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. Like, I cried when I read this book. And I like that it was a multi-character novel, multi-perspective. There's a lot about this book that, like, I feel like some things could have been changed, but overall, it's a phenomenal and stunning piece of literature. So that one has to make my top 10 for the year, just because I think it's having a slave narrative that focuses on a queer relationship, and that speaks and also finds a way to root kind of queer identity in the ancestral, in kind of African ancestral societies. I think that's such an interesting and such an important book to write. So definitely The Prophets made the list. Then the next one is a backlist that I only finally read this year, and it is Behold the Dreamers by Imbolo Mbue. Fam, I don't know what I was waiting for. I can see why this book makes it on lists every year, why everybody's obsessed with this book. It is fantastic. Imbolo Mbue does such a phenomenal job. with highlighting and exploring and examining the kind of immigrant experience for African immigrants, what it means to move to the US in search of like a better life, and what happens when you get disillusioned in that space. And it kind of questions, what does true happiness mean? What does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to aspire for happiness? Is it just material things, or is there something more? And the other thing that I loved about this book is, I think Jende, who's the main character, male main character, one of the most balanced, one of the best and most balanced representations of a Black African man, especially a Black African man in the immigrant experience. I think a lot of the time, rightfully so, because obviously a lot of African men are really married to patriarchy. They really ride for it so hard. There's a tendency to kind of portray them without nuance, without the complexities. But I think this book, you know that saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown? I think this book does such a great job of exploring what that means for gender and what it means to navigate the space where you have such a heavy responsibility to care for your family placed on you, and what it means to try and navigate that space, trying to be a good husband and try to not veer into being a dictator, but you kind of low-key are. And it's like the cultural pressures, and even Neni, what it means to navigate being a woman married in a space, in the kind of cultures and societies that believe that a woman's role is to submit, and how it, like, how even within love you navigate the space. And I just, this book is really good, so I definitely highly recommend this one as well. Then the last book of my top 10 of 2021 so far, of Q1, is a book that, like, God, I was so glad I loved this book, because African Bookstagram was going to drag me for filth across the floor if I didn't love it, and I'm so glad I actually did. And it is The First Woman by Jennifer Nantabuga Makumbi. Absolutely phenomenal. It is phenomenal. Like, I've had such a weird relationship with Jennifer's books because I didn't really like Chintu. Thank you so much, by the way, for the person who corrected me on my video when I was talking about this and I was calling it Kintu, because it's actually Chintu. It's just that in South Africa and Xhosa, like, a K is not a ch sound. So anyway, it doesn't matter. But thank you so much. So Chintu was actually not my fave. Then I read her short story collection, Manchester Happened, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it, I think, like 3.5 stars. I thought it was a really solid. I never give short stories 5 stars because I just always, there's something about them always that goes wrong. But that one was really good. This one is her crowning glory. This is such a great book. It is such a strong feminist text, such a strong book rooted in kind of African feminism, but also it's such a beautifully Ugandan book. Like, this is the kind of book that I wish a lot more African writers would write, and especially Black writers, where you steep the book in kind of, this book is steeped in Ugandan culture, in Baganda culture. The rest of us who are not Baganda, who don't understand the myths or whatever, you do your Googles and you figure it out. Jennifer doesn't pander to kind of white audiences, which I really like, because you guys remember when I said ties that tether, that was one of my biggest problems. And I thought that this book was also the kind of way she melds the current world, the modern space, with kind of mythology and with kind of the folklores and the folk tales around the kind of around womanhood, around the experiences of womanhood. I thought that was phenomenal. There was such a, I tabulated this a lot. There's so many great gems in this book. So yeah, this one definitely had to make the top 10 list. Right, so those are my top 10 books of 2021 so far, Q1. Yeah, so those are the books that I highly recommend. My absolute favorite books so far. This book, I'm interested to see how many of these make it onto the kind of yearly top 10, because that's like a highly contested space. Actually, I usually do a top 20 because I feel like a top 10 is like, it's asking for a lot, you know. But this year I actually think I might do a top 10 and a top 20, or like a top 5 that, you know, is like the elite, and then like a top 20 of like my best books. So like to separate it, because I think quite a lot of these books are really good, but I'm wondering if I'm going to read anything better as the year goes on. Right, so that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it instructive. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram on @PrettyXBookish. Like, comment, follow, share, all that fun stuff. Let me know if you've bought any of these off my recommendations, if you love them as much as I did. If you're thinking about any of these, you want more information, I'm always ready to chat. Thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.